Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Garden with Andy. Today we're going to be talking all about apple trees and how you can take your apple tree and prune it into something that's going to produce way more fruit for you next year. So why don't we just go ahead and dig in? Okay guys, so just to give you a little bit of a heads up for what to expect in this video, we're going to talk first about the main point of why do you want to prune your apple tree in the first place, why is it important, and what are you trying to accomplish? And then after that, we're going to go into some more detail. We're going to talk about configurations for how you prune your apple trees. We're going to talk about an open center versus just having one main trunk. And then we're going to talk about 7 tips for effective apple tree pruning. And after that, I'm going to actually show you some real life examples to kind of get you on your feet and, see it in real life. So first, I'm going to show you how I prune a moderately sized, basically full-grown apple tree, and then I'm going to take it down to below my garden where I have some more recent plants and show you example of myself as I prune a smaller apple tree that's less established and whatnot. All right guys, so first, what are you trying to accomplish when you prune your apple trees? I'm going to talk about 2 main things. You're trying to accomplish 2 main things, obviously with the end goal of trying to get more fruit production. But the 2 things that you're trying to do is 1, remove dead growth. Obviously, it really should go without saying, but anything that's dead on your tree doesn't need to be there. So that's goal number 1. And goal number 2 is to open up the canopy of the tree to allow more light and more airflow into the tree. So one thing I've noticed with my apple trees is that they are actually way less productive when they have more branches. I know it seems a little counterintuitive maybe, but the less branches they have, the more space there is for light and airflow to be getting into that tree, which means you'll have more fruit and healthier fruit. Whereas I have one tree in the back corner of my garden that really wasn't pruned very much, and it has way too much growth, and it produced like just a handful of apples last year. So I'm definitely gonna be getting that back in check. All right guys, so now that you know kind of the general gist of the idea, the what you're trying to accomplish when you're pruning your apple tree, let's talk about 2 different pruning configurations, the most popular ones. There's probably some others floating around there, but basically the 2 types of pruning configurations are an open center or a central leader. So essentially an open center is where you have the main trunk for, a couple feet off the ground, and then it just splits and the center is open. So you have light is coming and the tree is really spread out. Whereas a central leader is where you have the trunk that grows all the way to the top of the tree and you have branches coming out of the trunk. And obviously, there are like hybrids. You can do it anywhere in between. You can have a central leader, you can be an open center, but there's hybrids that are all in between where you can kind of mess with it and have a little bit of a mix between the 2. And honestly, that's pretty much what this one is. I didn't live here until more recently. This was already here, but it looks like it's been previously pruned to where it's a bit of an open center, but you can see we have 3 main trunks. So it is an open center, but it's not like a super open center like sometimes you might see. All right guys, let's talk about 7 principles for effective pruning. I'm gonna go through these pretty quick, but then you'll see them in action when I'm actually pruning the trees. Okay, so number 1, really obvious, I think, but I'm just gonna say it because you might not know, but you have to prune during the dormant season. So don't go out and try to prune in the spring when it's flowering, don't prune it in the summer, don't prune it in the fall. You have to wait till winter, wait until the growth dies down, wait till it's shed its leaves, or at least most of them, and it's actually dormant, and that'll help the tree self-repair and heal itself quicker. Going on to number 2, and that is protect the main stem. What that means is when you are actually making a cut, don't cut it so close to the main stem that you actually go into the main stem, because that opens up the main stem to fungi and pests and whatever, and it weakens the main stem. When you're pruning growth, you want to always make sure that you leave a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch of a stump basically going out of the tree so that you're not actually harming the branch that you're pruning off of. All right, principle number 3 is actually avoid loppers. I know probably when you go out to prune your apple trees, loppers are the first thing you reach for, but it actually really shouldn't be. When you're pruning an apple tree, you really want to use very sharp like snipes like this, or a saw. And the reason behind this is the loppers, especially if they're not sharp, but even if they're pretty sharp, when you try to lop off a fairly large branch with a set of loppers, it actually crushes the fibers inside the wood, and it makes it harder for the tree to naturally heal. If you use a saw, you make one straight clean cut, and none of the actual fibers inside the trunk are harmed. And if you use a pair of sharp snipes like this for littler branches, you know, like this or something, it just makes a clean cut. And again, you're not really having a large impact on the actual fibers inside of the branch. All right, guys, principle number 4 is to remove the center. So I actually have a little example with me, just because it's hard to explain without that. But in many cases, when you're pruning an apple tree, you'll find a branch that has a split into 3 parts. So you might be able to see it here. We have this little branch coming out in front, and then we have branches to either side. So obviously there's a lot of stuff going on in here. I like to, you know, imagine like what it looks like with all of its leaves, and there's way too much here, leaves shading each other, crossing over each other. So what we want to do, we know we want to remove some growth. I like to remove the center. And that is a super easy way, by removing the center, that you clear out the left and the right side and allow them to grow better. So in this instance, if it was growing about like this, and we have these two growing off to the side and this one kind of growing straight up and in the center, obviously the more this one grows, the more it's shading these two down here. So the very logical and obvious choice would be, have my snippers upside down. Okay, the obvious choice would be to go ahead and cut off that one right there. And now you just have these 2 branches. Principle number 5 is, when you have a branch that is growing upward facing the sky, always trim at a 45-degree angle. You've probably heard this one before, but the why behind it is essentially because when it rains, if your branch is cut just, you know, strictly horizontally, the water is going to get pulled up. It's going to be caught on that surface, because water pulls up on flat stuff. And it's going to enter into the branch and cause rot. So you always want to cut at a 45-degree angle when your branch is facing up toward the sky, and that will just allow water to run off the side and down the branch, and there won't be any problems. Principle number 6, I kind of mentioned this earlier a little bit, but it's always envision your tree with leaves on. So obviously it's essential to prune during the dormant season. So sometimes it looks, you know, like, oh yeah, it's good, nothing looks too crowded. But you always have to think, when it actually has leaves on it, it's gonna be way more crowded than it is right now. So think about what it would look like when it has leaves on, and make your choices based on that mental picture. Make sure that you are pruning out enough growth. I always tell people, don't be afraid to take off too much growth. You know, people are like a lot of times scared, like, just cut off, you know, a few little twigs and like prune my apple tree. But no, it's really, you do have to kind of get aggressive with it sometimes. But I also at the same time tell people, if you're taking off more than 1/3 of your tree at one time, then you're doing something wrong. So you want to make sure that you're taking off enough, pruning off enough branches that you're actually opening it up and letting more sunlight and air in. But at the same time, you don't want to go completely overboard. If you stay on top of it year after year after year after year, it'll be a lot easier, and you won't have much to prune each year. But if you're taking like a tree that is completely hasn't been pruned in a really long time, then you'll probably be taking off a lot of growth. As far as I can tell, it's been about 2 or 3, probably 3 years since this one's been pruned. But it has been pruned fairly well up till recently, so we're just gonna take care of that today. Okay, and the last of our 7 principles for effective apple tree pruning is avoid peeling bark. What I mean by this is, it's really easy to do with the saw, but when you cut through a branch, and obviously I'm not cutting through, I'm kind of snapping this, and then this happens. Whether it just be with bark or just like a whole part of the tree, but this is really bad. So you want to make a clean cut all the way through. A lot of times what will happen, especially with heavier branches that you cut with the saw, is you'll cut, and then at the very bottom, the weight of the branch will start snapping over, leaning over, and it'll just peel that bark and like really peel it down the branch. And so that is something that you really want to try to avoid. You can do this a number of ways. If you can, cut with the saw, like, you know, maybe a foot above where you actually plan to make the cut. And it doesn't matter if the bark peels there, because you're going to cut it off anyways, and then you can go back and cut where you're actually going to cut, and it should just be like a stub like this tall, and it won't be so heavy, so it won't cause the bark peeling. Or you can, cut like 3/4 of the way through on one side and then hold the branch and then cut from the other side, so that where you're actually snapping is in the middle. But a word of caution with that is you have a similar effect sometimes where the spot in the middle will tear, and it'll tear the fibers in the tree. So you want to avoid that too. Basically, your goal is just to get a clean cut all the way through. You don't want bark peeling, you don't want any of the tree tearing. You want a clean cut throughout the entire branch. All right, guys, we just talked about, the main goals when you're trimming apple trees. We talked about configurations with the open center or the central leader. And we talked about the 7 principles for effective pruning. So it's time to actually get our hands dirty and go do this. So I'm gonna start with an example of a bigger tree. That was pretty big. And then we'll work down and go down to the smaller trees. And if you want to, I put chapters in the video, so you're welcome to scroll ahead and watch whatever part pertains to you best. All right, guys, we're just getting ready to go in here and start pruning. I've never pruned these trees before. I haven't even seen these trees until this past year. I wanted to show you an example real quick of why it's really important to prune consistently every year. Because if you go too long between pruning times, then you'll end up with large branches that you need to prune. So here's an example right here of where previously, sometime in the past, a big branch grew out right here. And apparently whoever was pruning the tree decided that it needed to go, which it definitely did, because this is a bad place to have a branch. We're so close to the ground and all. But the problem is it was really big when he went ahead and cut it. And so you can see there's a really big scar here where it's healed around, but you just, it impacts the health of the tree. You try to avoid things like that. All right, guys, we're starting to get up here into the tree. So I just want to give you an example real quick of what a good cut looks like, when it's healed over, what your goal is. So your goal is to cut it when it's smaller, so it will minimize the damage on the tree. You can see right here are several good examples. You can see right here, and then right here. These ones have healed over very nicely, and you can hardly tell now that they were even there. All right, guys, really important example here. We talked about pruning off dead growth, so here is a really good example. Or just injured growth. I mean, really, like this is an example of injured growth. Let's see if I can find. Yeah, right here, kind of down toward the bottom right here. You can see that the branch actually has been basically torn off, but that's really bad. So even though it's still alive, it's still alive. It's gonna suck an enormous amount of energy out of the tree, and you're not gonna get any fruit there. So that is definitely a no-brainer. So we got the saw here. We are just gonna go ahead and get rid of that one. All right, guys, so there the cut is right there. Overall, pretty good, I'd say. You can see that we left a little bit of a stub right there to make sure that we're not harming the growth of this main stem that we do want to keep. You can also notice, maybe it's hard to see, but yeah, right there, you can see I cut it at a 45-degree angle because it is facing up, facing toward the sky. So we did pretty good. You can see though, right kind of here at the edge, that we did get a little bit of tearing. It's a little hard to avoid with the saw. We can see it on both edges. We had that bark tearing, so that's not great, but I mean, overall, that's pretty good. You can see over here off to the side, it looks like this cracked a long time ago, maybe a couple years in the past. Dead branch snapped and fell off. We're just gonna go ahead and cut about right here, just to help that wound heal off better, because you can see the way it is right now, there's a lot of broken bark fiber. It started to heal up, but I really don't like the looks of that and how it's healing up. So we're just gonna give it some help and cut it off about right there. All right, here's where we just cut that off. You can see it was completely dead in the inside there, that brown circle, but there was still some live growth on the outside. So I'm glad we cut that off. Hopefully it'll heal over nicely, and we won't have to worry about the tree putting energy into that little thing that it really shouldn't be putting energy into. All All right, guys, this is a really interesting instance. I'm not at all surprised, but like I was saying earlier, it's pretty common for apple trees to grow up and then split into 3, as you can see right there. So you can tell that we have the main trunk leader right here, and then we have 2 offshoots going either direction. Now, ideally in the past, we would have done what I called cut the center. We talked about that earlier. And what would have been best is when this tree was still growing and this branch was quite small, if we actually cut off end of the branch and let the growth go into these 2 areas right here, because now you can see what's happened is we have just a lot of unnecessary growth up there that's all kind of blocking each other, shading each other. So we can't cut it now because it's really big. At least I prefer not to cut it. So we're just gonna look higher and see what we can do kind of higher up there. You can see this little branch. I don't know. In general, I like to keep large trunks like this mostly free of growth and let them put their energy up toward the top. So we're just gonna go ahead and use the snipes, and we're gonna take off these 3 right here. Yeah, anytime that you find just like a random little tiny twig growing out from like a really large trunk like this, definitely just go ahead and clip it off, because if an apple were somehow to grow on there, you can tell what would happen is the apple would weigh it down so much and it would bend down, and it would end up just breaking the branch anyways. So we just need to get rid of stuff like that. All right, we can see with this right here, that one is dead right there, but we still have one alive right here. So I'm just gonna snip off, it's dead, yeah, snip off that right there. So I went ahead and snipped off that dead branch, and we let the live one keep growing that way. All right, guys, right here is a branch that I just cut off. That is an instance of the tearing the bark situation. So my little snippers aren't apparently sharp enough. I need to sharpen them. So they ended up kind of cutting some of this bark off or pulling it away. So you can see the result right here on the branch that we pruned. Let me see if I can get it focused. Is that there's a big streak right there where the bark is gone. So that's not ideal, but you know, the tree's big, and I mean, it'll definitely recover. All right, so we see we have, I don't know if you can tell how much you can tell from the GoPro. Yeah, it looks like we're pointing pretty good, but we have just a ton of growth up here, way too much. Let's see, looking down, this branch definitely does not need to be growing out of the trunk like that. This one, look, growing right out of the trunk, don't need that. Get rid of that. Same here, this big branch, we're gonna need to saw for that one. Tangled up, yeah. Come up from the bottom to kind of avoid some of this pinch. Yeah, perfect. See right here, we have a great cut. I didn't go too far to didn't kind of get into the main trunk, but I was able to, you know, still keep it pretty close. So that's exactly what you're looking for. You can see right here what we have is an instance of where looks like a couple years ago someone already cut off. See, yep, my GoPro's good. Okay, cut off a branch here, and we had 2 little suckers is what they're called. They came up out of that dead branch. We don't like suckers. We don't need things like that. So always try to get rid of stuff like that. There we go. There we go, down to the ground. All right, guys, right here, 1, 2, 3, classic example of cut out the middle. Just get rid of it. We don't need it. You can see it happened up here again. Cut out the middle, don't need it. That side sucker, don't need that. This one can, I'll cut it to a good fruiting stem. Tangled up in there, don't need all of that. Yeah, I'll probably get rid of this little one down here. Get rid of the end. That one's grown good, but yeah, we don't need that. See how much better this looks. We just have all of the energy going into these main 3. What is this? It's going straight down. Anything going straight down you usually don't want. It's just gonna get shaded. Straight up is much better. Get that one. My branches aren't falling all the way down, unfortunately. Having to kind of help them out a little. All right, we are way too busy up here. Definitely need to cut some stuff. Okay, here's the first we're gonna take out. This central middle one right here. Okay, I need to back up to get it. All right, guys, we've made pretty good progress here on this tree. I just really wanted to, show you kind of the methodology and the process of pruning a larger apple tree like this. So essentially, I just kind of came up here, got up here, and then there's a bunch of these little, different trunks, sort of. So like that's one, that's one, that's one. You can see I have one right here, and then there's one back, whatever, this one right here. So what I just went up with each, kind of assessed each individually, looked for what's like shading each other, what's out competing for sun and air, and made cuts to just kind of see, like up there it's a lot more thinned out. It's still not perfect by any stretch, but compared to like the side of the tree that I haven't got to, over here you can see that's just really messy, whereas where I've already cut, you can just see it's a lot more open, and there's no exact right or wrong as far as you should cut this branch and you shouldn't cut this branch. It's more of an art than a science. You're just looking for, what do I want to cut off? What'll increase airflow and allow more light into the tree? Like I said, envision it as if the leaves are on, and cut one branch at a time and go from there. So I'm gonna hop down out of here. It's getting later in the evening, and I'm gonna, even though I'm not completely done, I'll finish this up another day, and I'm gonna just hop over to one of the smaller trees and show you what kind of my methodology would be for a smaller tree. All right, catch you over there. All right, guys, so here are the two trees that we're dealing with, that one and that one. So let's see, just generally, like right off the bat, looking at things, or come over this angle, you can see that the two trees are really impeding with each other's growth, especially up there. They're kind of getting interlocked, intertwined. There's a lot of growth happening up there. You can see, like, you can imagine if all of this had leaves, that's just like a whole lot of branches. So we know right off the bat that we're gonna want to chop some. So yeah, let's go ahead and see what we want to do. Let's go ahead and look at this branch. So we can see coming up here, we have a lot of growth right here. So we're definitely gonna wanna cut some out. Let's grab our, boy, these are gonna be cold. Okay, let's grab our snips. We're gonna go ahead and take out this branch here. And let's see. Okay. You can see up here that when these have leaves on them, this branch and this branch are gonna kind of come into a conflict up there. So we're gonna take a look at the buds, and we're gonna make the snip right here above that bud. Anything down really low to the ground, especially if it's little, it's thin, we just wanna get rid of. So you can see like this right here, you can see that we have two buds that are gonna produce apples right there. But the problem is that if they produce apples, this it's gonna bend way over, and it's just not gonna be well. So we'll just cut that off. Cut that, and that, and that. Cut that. Way too much growth happening right here. So what do we wanna cut? Let's see. I'm gonna go ahead and take this off. It's kinda low. We have a damaged, something happened right there where it tore. So we're just gonna go down to the bud and snip. This one right here is pretty big, but it's really shading a lot. So I'm gonna cut that one actually. We can see that we have this branch right here that's kind of shading a lot. It's hard to tell, I guess, from the video, but we're just gonna go ahead and snip this off. Right up here, there's just way too much growth. You can see all three of those stems right there are shading each other out. So we're gonna cut the center out, and we're gonna get rid of that one right there. All right, guys, so last night my GoPro footage didn't turn out quite as good as I wanted. And I just want you to be able to see kind of what I did to these apple trees a little better. So I'm gonna come out, I'm walking out today, and I'm just gonna show you a little better. It's snowing right now. I probably should not have put my Crocs on, but oh well, I did it, so. Okay, let's take a look. Okay, so here our apple trees are, the smaller ones that I just trimmed. You can see, looking just right up there, compared to what they looked like before, that is a lot less growth. So I wanna come in and show you some of the cuts I made real quick. You can see, like, right up there, I cut one. I cut a lot out from there to kind of open up that space right there. You can see right here, I opened up some of that. You can see right up higher there, I cut that one about halfway. And then zooming up to back here, oops, higher, higher, higher. Yep, that one right there, I cut about halfway. You can see it like that one. So I don't want to show you all the cuts, but the principle of the matter is you can just see that I thinned it out a lot and that there's way less for it to grow on. So when I envision it having leaves, it just looks a lot better that way. So now, if this video did help you, I would ask that you would subscribe to the channel. That would help me out a lot and motivate me more to go out into weather like this, you know, to make videos for you. I plan to continue making regular content about weekly, so you can expect more. There'll be how-tos, garden like walkthroughs and different things like that. I'm gonna talk a lot about my grow light and seed starting setup here coming up, so definitely subscribe so you don't miss that. And I'm gonna go inside because I'm getting a little cold here standing out in my Crocs in the snow.